What's up, fungal associates? Welcome to Completely Arbortrary, the podcast about trees and other related topics. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Alex Crowson. And of course, as always, we have here Mr. Casey Clapp.
Hi.
Hi, Casey.
I, Alex, am looking at a bunch of very interesting things about tree voles, as we were talking about 30 seconds ago.
Yes, we often have a little conversation right before we start recording, and today's conversation was about voles and moles and squirrels.
Yeah.
Squirrels.
Squirrels.
Well, hi, Case.
Hey, Alex.
Today we have something pretty exciting happening, as teased last week.
It's true, we do. Very excited about it.
And I do say teased quite pointedly.
Oh, yeah, edged a little bit.
Yeah, we edged you last week. A word that Casey has heard of.
I have heard of it.
And we talked about last week weird sex.
We did. Well, I mean, that wasn't, I don't think, that weird, was it? That's just, I guess it's weird in a plant version.
Well, I think we specifically said the words weird sex.
Oh, okay.
I'm not kink shaming these trees.
See, that's what I thought you were doing.
No,
I was like,
no.
Alex, you got to, everyone's got their different ways of going about it.
I haven't told many people this, but I'm dioecious.
I'm dioecious. Alex, thank you. Oh my gosh.
Well, Casey, this is an interesting tree, one I've never heard of.
Yes. That's right.
And the name reminds me of candy. And I'll tell you why. This is called the striped maple.
It is.
I think of like candy striper.
I see. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think of maple candies.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's
candy canes, the ones that are striped.
Yep. Oh, sure. Yeah. Barbershop.
Yeah. If you take a packet of Smarties, which, as everyone knows, my favorite candy, and you flip them horizontally, they then become striped.
Interesting, Casey.
If you look at them with your certain perspective changed.
Sure.
That's my opinion.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
Stripes can happen. Whatever.
Alex, I don't want to hear your propaganda about stripes being vertical or horizontal. That is irrelevant in this conversation.
Yeah, my patternaganda.
Yeah, patternaganda.
So dumb. Well, today we're talking the striped maple, and we're going to talk about sex, baby. Yeah. We got to talk about this tree, but we got to do so after a quick break. But before that, did you know, Casey, that this podcast is supported fully by the lovely people who listen to it?
Oh, and you know what, Alex? I did. But mostly, I knew that everyone who listens to it's lovely.
That too.
Yeah, that's you out there. Yeah.
And if you want to support this podcast, join our little horde of minions, our little mycorrhizal network. That's better. At arbortrarypod.supercast.com. That's ARBORTRARY pod.supercast.com. Become a Treemium member.
Yeah.
And there you can sign up for all sorts of things, including the Cone Club, where we send you monthly cone stickers illustrated by a different artist every month.
That's right. I'm very excited about this month. I'm about to send them off, too. Isn't that exciting?
That's right. If you want to get those stickers and support this podcast, again, that's arbortrarypod.supercast.com. Become a Treemium member. Striped maple. That's right. After the break, we'll be right back with Completely Arbortrary. Welcome back to Completely Arbortrary. Today we're talking striped maple. No, I'm not talking about the candy. I'm talking about the tree. Casey.
Yeah.
I'm going to just take a stab in the dark here.
Ooh, okay.
So to speak.
Yep.
Okay, so Acer.
Yes.
Stripifolium.
No.
Okay, what is it?
Acer pensylvanicum.
Pensylvanicum. So this does not reflect the common name.
It does not. But what it does is reflect where you may find it.
Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
Which means forests of Pennsylvania.
The forests of Penn's forests.
That's right, yes.
Yes, which
Sylvania.
Is great. Yeah.
Well, Casey, let's imagine that you and I are walking through this tree's namesake, a nice forest in Pennsylvania.
Just beautiful.
Maybe just outside of Philadelphia. And we come across some Acer pensylvanicum. We were just talking about this.
Yes, you did it. Good job.
What? Let's ID this tree.
All right, Alex, I am very excited to tell you all about this tree because this is a maple. Now, we have covered a maple here, a maple there.
We have, yeah.
And one thing that has been in common with all of these maples is that they have maple-like leaves.
Yeah.
This one doesn't quite have maple-like leaves.
Wow.
Now, I love to talk about maples because everyone knows maples, right?
Yeah, they're one of the most popular.
They are.
I would say in the common knowledge.
Yes.
Maples are up there.
Exactly. It's like maple, pine, oak. Those are like
Totally.
Those are like the top 3 all the time. You
Yep.
ask someone like, name the first tree that comes to your mind. Maple.
Totally, yeah.
It's just always there. So it's very well known. It's obviously on the Canadian flag. Like it is the archetype similar to like an oak that has the curved lobes. Everyone's like,
Yeah.
I know exactly what an oak looks like. I
Totally.
know that leaf type. But it turns out that they're not all like that. This is one of those where it actually has leaves that are very variable. I was going to try and change the way I said that, and I was like, yeah, just go for it, dude. You got this. So they have leaves that look like kind of lance-like leaves, where it just looks like the tip of a spear. So they come out almost left and right, a little bit cordate on the leaf, which means they have kind of like heart-like lobes on the top around the petiole, and then they just curve straight down to a perfect, beautiful point. There you go. Easy, simple leaf.
This varied part, though.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a couple of variations.
Yes, exactly. What do you see?
Well, I see one that's a little more maple-like.
Yeah, it has like 3 lobes, one center, 2 on either side.
But it kind of looks like the, I don't know, like the Apple redesign of a maple,
Yeah, totally.
Like a modern minimalist maple leaf.
You know what? We only need 3 lobes. That's it.
Introducing Maple 2.0.
Maple 2.0 with fewer lobes.
And more syrup.
And more syrup.
But yeah, it looks kind of maple-ish.
Yeah, and so it looks a lot like that middle one, kind of between these variations. The middle one kind of looks like a trident maple to me, which is another common maple. You can find it growing all the way around. But it has that same kind of leaf where it has 3 lobes, demonstrably just 3. They pop out and they're very triangular at the top, so it looks like a very classic trident shape.
Yeah, interesting.
Little plump. It's kind of like take a trident and like blow it up like a balloon.
Yeah.
And they all kind of squish together.
It's a balloon
Looks
animal
like that.
trident.
Exactly. Then the last version, that's kind of the extreme. Each one of those 3 lobes is way larger. The leaf is bigger and rounder. And then at the base of the 2 lobes on the side, there's almost 2 other lobes. So it's kind of like the idea of a lobe is there on the leaf, but it hasn't quite manifested itself.
Totally. But that one looks the most like your average maple leaf.
Yeah.
Just really filled out.
Exactly. So filled out that it's almost unrecognizable.
Yeah.
And so, of course, it generally is. People will see this and they'll think, man, that doesn't even look like a maple. But the big trick is, just like all maples, if you want to tell the difference, or you want to tell the difference between maples and not maples.
I know.
What is it?
Samara.
Samara. They always have the double Samara, which are their 2 little seeds with these long wings coming out. There's always going to be a pair of them connected at that basal area right next to that where that seed is connected.
If you're a kid or a playful adult, you might take a little Samara and throw it up in the air and watch it helicopter its way down.
Exactly.
I loved doing that as a kid, Casey.
I still love doing that. I am a playful adult.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
I'm playful in other ways.
Yeah?
Like my Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, all right, I see.
Less like throwing Samaras in the air.
Yeah, just throw your Nintendo Switch in the air, watch it helicopter its way down.
Oh, it's broken now.
Wow, it goes way faster than I expected.
I didn't catch it. Shit.
Well, the other thing is that their leaves are always going to be oppositely arranged.
Okay.
This is the other big thing. So the leaves don't necessarily need to look quintessentially maple-like.
Is there a general term for trees that have oppositely arranged leaves or alternately arranged leaves? You just call them that?
Those are the terms,
Okay.
yeah. That's it.
Okay. Can we maybe should come up with some someday?
Yeah.
Like opposidium versus alternica.
Yeah. Hey, that sounds great. I like that. Yeah. That also does like a masculine version, a female or a feminine version.
Yes.
With the A at the end versus the UM.
That's right.
That would be so funny. Oh, you have opposite leaves? Very feminine.
That's very femme of you.
So the thing about this is it's a little It's a little tree, Alex.
Really?
It only maybe gets to 20 feet tall.
Now, that is a small tree.
It's a small tree. So
There was a version of me a few years ago where I would have said, that's not too bad. That's pretty big tree. But now I know better.
It is. It's a small tree. 15, 20 feet is what you can reasonably expect. But just like other small kind of understory trees, a quintessential example is the Japanese maple. That's pretty much like it still becomes tree-like if you give it the opportunity. Has stems that come up, they spread out, and they go wider than they are tall because these are generally understory trees. And they become tree-like, but they also fit that weird niche of like, I am not trying to take dominance here. I'm just chilling in the understory, growing out sideways, and snaking my way to where I'm going.
For sure.
So this is of course, it grows over in the east. So as its name suggests, pensylvanica, it's native to a lot of the eastern North America, but it grows in like all these different ranges. So very far south to Georgia, all the way up to like Minnesota and Nova Scotia.
Okay.
But they're very, very common in these understory areas. And there's a few different species that grow out there, and they're all a part of what I love to call, and what is I love to call it because it's the real name, but it also is just one of my favorite names of any trees in the world.
Let's hear it.
The snake bark maples.
Snake bark.
Yeah.
Oh, good impression.
Thank you.
You spooked me.
Yeah, I know. If I was a snake, I would have bit you.
What is what is the snake of snake bark?
It is the bark. It is actually the way that their bark is patterned. So they have these long striations that grow up the bark. And it's just more or less where the bark is splitting. So, of course, we know that as a tree grows, it grows from the inside of the bark. So as the cork cambium, which grows the bark, as it is producing all of this bark that's coming out, it doesn't necessarily go as fast as the wood is being produced underneath it.
Wow.
So as the wood expands, the bark expands sometimes at a different rate, and you get those little splits.
I was just thinking, looking at these, that they look like stretch marks.
Yes. Yeah,
they
yeah.
almost literally are.
Quite literally, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So they are wherever these little cracks ended up developing for whatever reason. And they grow on the kind of the medium to older sized or older aged stems. Larger stems is mostly where you'll find it.
It's kind of an incredible look.
It really is.
I love it.
Friggin' gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like, I love the look of these, and I do not know why they are not planted 1,000 times more.
Totally.
There is a species that you can find out west here that's planted with very infrequent relativity, and it's called the David maple, and that is Acer davidii. There's also Acer capillipes, Acer ruffinerve, and Acer tegmentosum, whatever that means.
These are all snake bark?
Yes, these are all snake bark maples that are in the section Macrantha. Isn't that another fun one?
Macrantha?
Macrantha.
Okay.
It sounds like someone's
Macrantha.
making... Yeah. Oh, Macrantha. I need some Malanta.
Oh, my God. I think another name for these, have you heard of stretch marks being called tiger stripes?
No, but I like that.
I think it's like taking back the,
Yeah, yeah. Because they happen during pregnancy on women often.
Sure, yeah.
And so, I like that. It's like, oh, these are my tiger stripes. I don't know if you know this, but I passed a child. It's like, oh my God, okay.
I'm a tigress now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pregnant women or, young boys who gain a lot of weight suddenly, for instance.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I'm in there.
But I think we could also call these tiger stripe maples.
I love that.
Because they look almost more like that to me than snakes.
Tiger stripe, snake bark.
Yeah.
And then some people call them stripe bark, which is stupid.
I will say, Casey, our tree today, pensylvanicum, has another common name that I'm a big fan of.
Oh.
I'd like to discuss briefly.
Okay, perfect.
The moosewood maple.
Moosewood maple, that's right.
What does that come from?
I don't know.
Okay.
I got no idea.
It's very folky,
Yeah, I would wonder if it's like how the branches, like how their architecture comes out, so it kind of looks like it pops out like the horns.
Sure.
But the thing is, moose famously have like the big horns that kind of have a lot of tissue in between their spikes.
So like webbed horns.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know exactly where that comes from.
Maybe the leaves, because they're sort of like webbed maple leaves.
There you go. That might be. But this is moose wood rather than moose leaf.
Well, that's true.
I don't know.
Well, okay.
Yeah, I didn't look that up.
If anybody knows, write to us.
Please, yeah, put it on the back of a $20 bill and send it.
Ooh, nice idea.
Yeah. And I will say, I did get one thing wrong. It is the only species of snakebark maple in that section in the United States.
Okay.
There are other small maples that we have around, but this is the only one that's in that subsection.
And you said over here we have David.
Yes, but it's only planted. It's not native. It's also native
okay.
to the eastern side of Asia, so like China and Japan.
Oh.
Yeah, so there are multiple different species here. There's about 18 to 21, depending on how you look at it.
Wow.
Mostly Eastern Asia, Himalayas, Japan, and then just this one that's in the eastern of North America. And they're just like gorgeous, wild-looking trees. Their bark, I just cannot get enough of.
Yeah.
But all of their leaves do kind of that similar thing. They do not look like maple leaves. So there's a whole subsection that clearly is one clade because they've got a lot of these things all put together.
Casey, I want to talk about the flower really briefly.
Yeah,
we haven't
you do?
touched on the flower.
Well, you know why, Alex? It's pointless.
Okay, hold on.
Well, okay, what do you like about this?
Usually I would say utility flower.
Okay.
But I think they're kind of cute.
All right, give us a description. What do you think?
They've got kind of this pendulous. Are they not a catkin?
Nope.
Jesus Christ! What are the other flower? The hanging flowers.
Yeah. This would be a pendulous.
Pendulous.
Well, yeah. This is good radio.
Fuck you. What is it?
It's a raceme.
Raceme. I wouldn't have got that.
Yep.
But it does have this precious little little sort of like ball gown kind of appearance. These little trumpets hanging down.
It does. I'll agree. It does look like kind of a child's dress. You know?
Yeah.
Where it's just like, oh, it's Easter. It's the first in spring.
Totally.
We're gonna go, do something fun outside.
Yeah, it just looks very precious and
like early 1920s.
Yes, the roaring. Yeah, I see it as like an Alice in Wonderland in that garden scene. It would come to life, and each of those little heads would have a face.
Yeah, all right, I can see that. All right, fine. I'll capitulate.
One man's opinion.
Yes, which I think is fair. I do like your opinion. I usually ask about it once a week, minimum.
It's true.
So in this case, I think okay. I'll give it. But for everyone else out there, go take a look. They're like as green as the leaves. Like,
yeah, that's really
nothing
odd.
To them.
Yeah.
They're all wind pollinated. I think sometimes maybe insects will go and hang out, but for the most part, they're not really looking to get a lot of action.
Very utility, but I'm not even using that as an insult.
Yeah, all right, that's fair. So I accept this. Now they're very lovely. The whole tree. They have this weird kind of low form, like I was talking about, and they don't generally like create big, massive canopies. They're not going to be showstoppers, but they do grow in a very interesting way that is all part and parcel for what we were talking about kind of last week.
Yeah.
And while I was doing research for last week's tree, this popped up and I was like, oh, wait a second. I love that tree. Let me look into this more.
Wow.
And so
Casey's literally rubbing his hands together.
I am. Sorry. I was holding my computer for a long time.
Oh, I thought you were like, ooh, yeah.
No, I was like, oh, my wrist has been open for a long time. I need to close it and stretch for a second.
I see.
So, Alex, last week, you may recall, we talked about the holly and its dioeciousness.
Yes.
Dioecy. Now, that is when it's this, when a tree is in two houses, which generally we know evolved from a monoecious, a single house. Just like you said, mommy and daddy got a divorce, now they're living in separate places.
Yes.
It's exactly the situation. Now you have two trees that have, for whatever reason, developed from a single plant that has, a perfect or a complete flower, which has both sex parts inside one flower, to maybe trees that have different flowers on the same tree, but one is male, one is female, produces only pollen, produces only ovules. And then the final step is they separate and have trees that do only male flowers and trees that do only female flowers.
Yes.
We also talked about how that kind of has a little bit of some baggage that comes with it. So if you are a female tree, you have to produce an ovule. When that ovule is fertilized, you then have to produce the fruit that comes along with it. So classically, take an acorn. Yeah, you have a lot of effort that has to go into producing the acorn from the flower that has the ovule in it, which has the piston and all those other parts that do that work. It's very complicated.
Yeah.
But then the other flowers that produce just the pollen just produce pollen. That's all they do. They just throw out their pollen and then they're done.
Yeah. Don't I know it?
Don't I know it? Anyway, I have 600 babies. That's what I'm trying to say. So when you separate that with dioeciousness, now you have two trees that are almost like doing their own thing, right?
Yeah.
But they have different responsibilities that are unrelated to each other. So this is a question that people posed and started noticing out in the world of just nature in general, that sometimes, depending on the situation, one of those sexual expressions is better or more advantageous at a different time.
Dioecious versus monoecious?
No. Male versus female.
Oh.
So they have found in, let me see, about 250 plants, 8 of which are maples, including at least 2 different species in this striped maple, snakebark maple subsection.
Okay.
That will switch their sexual expression. One will produce male flowers, produce pollen, and then over time decide, I am now going to only produce female flowers.
Wow, this is...
Or vice versa.
Transsexual.
Yes, in the term of the science, talking in botany terms, or even just kind of larger, this is environmental sex determination, or ESD.
Environmental sex determination.
Yes.
So it has the ability to say, I think being female right now would be better for me.
Correct.
Or I think being male would be better for me.
Yes, and this is a little bit different than I don't want to compare this to humans at all.
Of course not.
There is just no quite, it's just everything's different about it.
Yeah.
However, what's interesting is that it is, if we used animals and said, you have a uterus versus testicles, this would be literally you always grow a uterus and then it falls away when you're done because it's the ovary that produces this thing. So it's a little weird. This is why it's hard to do this. But then at one point you're like, you know what? Now I'm just gonna go testicles, and you stop growing your uterus, and you start growing your testicles.
Maybe that's
Isn't that fun to think about?
Yeah, sure.
One just drops off and you grow the other.
Oh my God.
And you switch back when
I don't like thinking about this.
I think this would make a really weird episode of was it Black Mirror or something like that?
Sure, like Twilight Zone.
Yeah. You wake up one day and you have completely different parts.
Yeah.
You go to sleep, next day following, you've gone back.
Wild.
I know. So anyway, that's the last experiment we're going to do, taking this into humanity, because it gets really funky real fast.
So I'm assuming that the tree kind of bases this decision on how much energy it has.
Oh, Alex, you're so good.
I didn't mean to jump the gun.
No, you didn't jump the gun. That's perfect. So, but here's the thing. This is an adaptation that works in what scientists thought was one way, and they did a lot of experiments, and they said, okay, let's check this out. This actually works well, and we can correlate it to different reasons. So one would be the size of the plant. So if you're a big plant, you're a healthy plant, you have more energy, and you've had more stored energy inside of your wood, your roots, and all your twigs. So now you're like, hey, this is really good moment for me to produce the more high energy flowers that would help my genes be moved forward into the future.
Sure.
So your offspring, you will, instead of making pollen flowers, low cost, you'll make the ovule flowers, the female flowers that are higher cost, but now you can afford it. It's like, oh, I've been saving for a long time. I got a good job. I'm plugged into the system.
Yeah.
I can afford this new splurge.
So are you definitely going to produce female flowers if you are able?
It's really not, it's not that cut and dry.
Okay.
So they studied this particular tree, and there's this one study that I have linked in our show notes, and they found that over 4 years, 50%, just over 50% of the trees changed their sex, and a quarter of those changed it back.
Whoa.
Which usually doesn't happen. Most of the time in nature, it goes from one to the other, and that's it.
Okay.
But sometimes, in this maple's example, it'll switch back.
Wow.
It'll start producing another kind of flower.
Multiple times or just the once?
As far as I know, they just said multiple times. So I don't know if it was just back and forth or if it was, 1, 2, 3, 4 over the 4 years.
Sure. Wow. Okay. Now, so it's not like for sure if I have the energy, I'm going to be female.
Yeah.
And if I don't, I'm male.
Yes. Now, our maple is interesting. So some trees will, and some plants kind of generally, they will switch based on conditions like stress.
Oh, sure.
So I would be producing all of my female flowers, high energy, then a drought comes through, and I'm like, I can no longer afford this apartment. I got to move, stop producing, or I got to cut back. Stop producing the high energy female flowers and start producing the low cost pollen flowers.
Sure.
So you're still getting your genes out there. You're just hoping that now they will go find something else and then you will be the paternal parent rather than the maternal parent.
I can see one downside with this.
Yeah, what do you see?
We talked last week about dioeciousness and how it would die out.
Yeah.
When oops, we're all male and we have no females. We're all dead, right?
Is that like the newest version of Captain Crunch?
Oops, all males.
Oops, all males. Just a bunch of sperm.
Oh my God.
Well, they'd be big enough and made of corn or something.
Gross.
What fun.
But
continue.
I'm thinking oh, I can switch whenever I want, and we all we don't coordinate. We all decide to switch, and suddenly, whoops.
What if most of your population is in a place that experienced drought?
Yeah,
you all become male, right? Yeah, that's a huge issue. So it very well could be that's the case.
Okay,
but I don't know on all those other flowers, or maybe they live elsewhere because a lot of these aren't trees necessarily. There are lots of different species of plants in all different forms and fashion.
Okay,
so there might be hundreds and hundreds all over the place in different places. Some are tapped into water, some are in higher areas. So it maybe is not so bad that it's actually caused that, but it might, Alex. I don't know. That's a good question.
Okay.
So that's one side of it. So people basically made this theory, and they said we think that it is more or less energy based, and they're going to switch from female high cost to male pollen low cost when things get hard. And that's when you start having this, what they call male dominant expression.
Wow.
And this is, it seems kind of reasonable if there's like an energy trigger in a plant where if it gets enough, then it will put out fruit.
Sure, like a threshold of some kind.
Yeah, exactly. And if there's not, then it just doesn't have the right amount of hormone that doesn't trigger this thing, and then it, defaults to this or that.
Right.
So that is one thing, and it makes sense. And they're like, yeah, this totally works. But for the snakebark maple, Acer pensylvanicum, they found that it's exactly opposite.
That when times are good, they want to be male.
Uh-huh.
And when they have less energy, they want to create female flowers?
Exactly.
Why?
Why indeed?
Oh,
this is so interesting.
An unsolved case?
It's a bit of an unsolved case.
Shit.
So, but it kind of makes sense in a certain regard. So what they found in this study is that, first off, it's hard to say, is that tree healthy or is that tree stressed in some way?
Sure.
It's just a difficult qualitative thing that you have to turn into quantitative kind of study material.
Yeah.
So they were like, okay, we're going to define this and we're going to set some parameters and we're just going to go with that. And they found that generally speaking, when they said this one seems more stressed, it would start producing female flowers.
Wow.
When it produced female flowers, you would think that then it produces the fruit, which is high energy. It's already stressed, so it's going to use a lot of its energy. Then it will probably die because the tree is now using all of its energy to put out this fruit.
You know why they do this?
Why?
Because girls get it done.
It's like, all right, is no one going to take the goddamn mantle here and just lead us into the next generation? All right, I'm going to do it. And then turns into a woman.
Uh-huh.
All right, a female. We don't want to, again, we got to be careful here.
Yes, thank you.
So that is, I think, a fine theory. I do like that. I think
girls get it done?
Exactly. I think that's it's an empowerment theory for female trees.
Sure, why not?
I think it's good.
Speaking of characterization.
Let's not talk about that, but fun idea. Anyway, so this case actually, I think, has more to do with a stress response that we see in other trees.
Ooh.
So we have brought this up a few times. I think there's been a couple questions, and it has to do with cone crops or fruit crops in trees that are struggling.
Yes.
But these are usually monoecious trees. So they have both parts on them at the time.
Can you give me an example?
An example would be a Douglas fir.
Okay.
Where a Douglas fir, if it's stressed, it will trigger it to have a huge cone crop.
Big flush of cones.
It'll be laden with more cones while the rest of the canopy is thinning and lighter green. And then in the next few years, you could expect that tree to just kick the bucket.
The thinking is there. The thinking, I'm putting in air quotes.
Okay, I see the air quotes. Okay.
That the tree's like, God, I feel it coming.
Yeah.
I better just make a million babies and then die like the salmon in the river.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay.
That's literally it. It's like I have to jettison all my escape pods and carry on my future.
Totally.
Because I'm not going to make it for whatever reason.
Wow.
Doesn't mean that things won't change and it will be perfectly fine after that. Maybe it'll just die back and then regrow. Who knows?
Well, now I wonder, are these snake bark maples, are they like, is that also a stress response?
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
I don't know.
But have we measured like how many of those trees die after they switch to female?
Well, we don't know, but this study does talk quite a bit about it, and it says, we have all these different ideas about what could be going on, but it's not quite clear.
Okay.
The big thing of it is that patterns of sex expression, health, and mortality in sex-changing trees. So they talk about it. They say, hey, we noticed this pattern, which is opposite of the normal pattern that we would expect. We'd expect the tree would want to live, so it would do everything in its power to save energy, make smaller leaves, don't grow as thick, reduce the amount of defense that you're putting your energy towards and put it more towards something else. Put it towards maybe making more fruit. In this case, that would be the case that they're switching sex to produce way more fruit and carry itself on as like this last gasp of saying, I'm just going to throw everything out there and I'm going to make sure that my seeds are actually going to go out. Because if I throw out a bunch of pollen, I have no idea if that's actually going to land anywhere.
Totally. It's kind of a bad bet.
Yeah, but if I put out a bunch of flowers that will produce seeds, then I'm pretty positive that seed, if it's fertilized, is going to be my genes moving forward.
Totally, yeah.
So it's a bit of a better bet, right?
Interesting.
So I think that probably is what ultimately it is. It's just this stress response that triggers a big cone crop or a big fruit crop.
Yeah.
In this case, it just kind of goes opposite of the tree's best interest in a I want to live way, but it is in the tree's best interest of I want my offspring to live and be viable.
It's quite a selfless act.
It seems like it.
Or I guess maybe not really, but yeah, it is.
Yeah, well, maybe, but yes. Now, I think that
Wow.
it does make sense to me because I think that this is a pattern that we've seen in lots of trees lots of times. So a great example are any fire-dependent species that let's say the knobcone pine down in southern Oregon, Northern California, grows in really thick stands and then gets burnt up the second fire comes through. They just go, whoo, and they're gone.
Wow.
But that's their scheme. Lodgepole pine does the same thing. As soon as a giant fire comes through, they throw their seeds out and then they regrow in this brand new perfect mineral soil with no competition. So then they rebuild their stand. But their whole idea is I'm going to grow, I'm going to produce seed, then I'm going to get completely eviscerated, and then I'm going to become a new forest after that, or my offspring is going to.
I think that's interesting because we as humans are constantly like putting our perspective on things that aren't human.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like, oh, look at that dog, he's smiling. It's like, no,
He's not.
He's baring his teeth. 'Cause he's gonna bite you. But like, we hear about that, like that tree, and it's like, oh, that's so sad. But like, it's just another like way of living.
It is like octopus does the same thing, right? The octopus mom will not leave the nest until all of its babies are okay and off to the point where it just atrophies everything and just dies.
Wow.
But there's no way its instincts do not say, okay, everything's going to be fine. This is good. Go eat. When you're done, it just stays there and dies. But Alex, I think what you're talking about is generally there. So if we apply that to trees, then you have to think, okay, that tree, if it's not conscious in the way that we think we are, or a dog or an animal or anything, then we can at least say that it has an instinct of, I am stressed, so my response is going to be make this physiological change, produce a certain kind of flower, and that has generally been a successful evolutionary strategy.
Yeah.
And I have survived.
Totally. Just looks different than ours.
Exactly. It looks way different than ours.
Yeah.
So, but there's, it's a weird thing for humans to conceive of how other things conceive of death.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to consider.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that this is such a fascinating study because also this tree in particular, and the other one, Ruffinerves, is another maple species that does this.
Ruffinerves?
Ruffinerves. It's Acer Ruffinerves.
Oh, fun.
So that's another one that also does this. And they are, it's just kind of like going against the grain. All these other 250 or so species, they all follow this one pattern. And this one's like, nah, I'm actually going to do it an opposite way.
Yeah.
Yet it still seems to be a functional evolutionary success.
Interesting.
Because they're very common trees. You'll find them all over the place if you go out and look.
I haven't thought about this a lot, but like the different ways, we talked about monoecious versus dioecious last week. And like both are completely viable, and dioecious is like kind of a new thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just interesting to think about like evolution working in that way in such like a macro level, know, like because reproduction is so core to the experience of life.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of I get a little existential. I'm like, whoa, that's spooky.
It really gets you there, right? It really does. So I have one update to add to this as I was listening and looking through to say, hey, I think they probably said something about this. 75% of dead trees flowered female immediately before death.
Oh my God.
So they are definitely moving towards female as they get closer to death. Wow. So this is like
aren't we all?
Yeah, hey, aren't we all?
Completely meaningless. It just felt right to say.
Yeah, honestly, everyone's like, yeah. I think, yeah.
That is wild. Wow. Okay.
It's wild. It's really an interesting thing. So I agree with you. Like the more you think about it, the more there's like different different ways to approach it and different strange tactics that things use with different repercussions.
And it's almost like impossible to come up with any. You know what I mean? Like,
I guess I don't.
I guess it's hard to imagine a new way to do things until you're told this is a new way to do things.
Yeah.
At such a core level,
Yeah, right?
Like reproducing your species.
Yeah, do that differently.
Yeah, what?
I don't know exactly how.
And here's a tree that does it like this. And you're like, oh, that's fucking weird.
Yeah.
Because it all sounds like science fiction, like these are alien species.
Exactly, yeah. And they are, in a true sense, their life experience is just completely different.
Yeah.
Everything about how they function, how they grow, how they survive, how they live, die, reproduce, it's all almost unfathomable compared to how animals do it.
Totally.
Just like dioeciousness, that is something we can understand because that we can actually kind of relate to that. We have a binary in terms of the sperm and egg, right? That is these two main sexual expressions in almost every animal, like almost every single eudicot, like everything that is a certain side of the animal kingdom or the life kingdom rather. And then some plants, they just do the one, like it does its own. It's like a slug. Slugs are like, yeah, man, I'm just gonna like do you and you do me, and then I'm gonna do you and you're gonna do me too, because they're like that. Anyway, sorry, that was a fun one. But like mushrooms, have like 10, 20, 30, hundreds of different sexual expressions.
Ferns.
Yeah. Well, ferns are still just that binary.
Oh,
there
sure.
is just two different kinds.
Sure.
But like, it's if you look at the life again, or the vital question, I was talking about this last week.
Yeah.
He discusses this, and he's like, "There's no reason that there needs to be like two, because that means that there is only 50% of the population that any given member of the population can actually reproduce with.
Totally.
But if you had 3 or 4 or 5 different sexual expressions, then there could be 3 or 4 or 5, like you could actually have 4/5 of the population be open for your reproduction. And that's kind of what mushrooms do in a lot of ways, which is just weird to think about. Like, it's unfathomable to us.
Like humans have 7 more sexes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That's fucking weird.
What's your preference? Well, I guess all of them. I don't know. That's a dumb question. Yeah. It's like, who knows? Isn't that wild?
That's really, really wild.
I think that goes to your point of like, we can't even come up with a new way to think about it.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay, well, what if I didn't even think that there was like 3, 4, 5, 6 sexual expressions? Like what?
Yeah, you hear about that, and I almost have like the mental version of the feeling in your stomach when you go down a big hill or like a roller coaster. I'm like, whoa.
It's weird to think
like
about.
This big revelatory, like, oof, man.
Yeah, all by just looking at a dumb tree with beautiful bark.
Well, speaking of that dumb tree, Casey, we got to give it a dumb rating, but it's got to happen after some dumb ads.
Yeah, that sounds good.
But we will be right back with Completely Arbortrary. Welcome back to Completely Arbortrary. That was our discussion of the Acer pensylvanicum et al.
That's right.
It's time for our rating of this tree, and here's how it works. We're going to give some final thoughts on it and then give it a rating of 0 to 10 golden cones of honor. Casey, as a resident male of the species,
thank you.
We will begin with you.
I appreciate that. Alex, I really do think stripe bark, snake bark, tiger stripe, moosewood, maples are fabulous. I just love them. Every time I see one, I'm like, God, you're cool.
Yeah.
Why are there not 10,000 more of you everywhere all the time?
You don't hear that a lot from you, Casey.
They're these small trees. Everyone loves a small tree. I do often critique these people because I think big trees are most of the time better. But if you have a bunch of big trees or you don't have the space to plant a big tree, then you should plant the world's coolest little tree that does wildly interesting stuff, like change its sex when you stop watering it. That would be kind of fun. And then start watering again, see it go back, and then then have that tree like send you a note later to be like, just stop it, would you?
That was really stressful for me.
I'm really stressed out. As you can see, my flowers are completely changed. So I just think that they're awesome trees. When I get the opportunity, I'm going to collect as many as I can and plant them everywhere. So you can walk down the road or wherever my arboretum is going to be, because I haven't told you this, but I'm going to start my own nursery and arboretum sometime in the near future.
Okay, wow.
I've given myself 5 years to make that happen.
Is this real?
Yes, this is real.
Wow.
I decided this last year. By last year, I mean like a month ago.
Okay.
Anyway, this is going to be a part of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a whole snake-a-lay, which would be cool.
The snake-a-lay.
Yeah.
Complete with snakes.
Complete with snakes. Watch your step.
They bite.
So anyway, back to the tree. I think that I think they're so cool. They're not giant trees. They're not necessarily going to be like the world's most perfectly formed, small little specimen tree.
I would say they're not superfluous in any way.
Yeah, but they will. We do
this every time.
I love it. We do this every time.
What the fuck?
Superlative, Alex, is what you're looking for.
They're not superlative in any way.
But I do love a superfluous tree. These are not superfluous tree. Everything about this tree is useful and well organized.
Sure.
It's very laconic.
I kind of feel that way about this tree.
Yeah, you do. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Anyway, so I think that it is a beautiful, beautiful example of a small tree that can grow in weird ways.
Yeah.
And have like this snaking pattern of its limbs that also covered in what looks like snake skin.
Totally.
So I'm going to give it a solid 7.9 golden cones of honor.
Great score.
It's a small tree, so it can't get any higher than that.
Oh,
but
wow.
It's also so unique and underplanted. Go find them. Go plant them. And if you want, you could also plant Acer, as I said, capillipes, Caudiform, Crataegifolium, Davidii, Forestii, Laxiform, Maximowitzii, Metcalfii, etc. There's like 18.
Oh my gosh, the snake barks.
Yeah, I was gonna go on, but the names got harder, so I decided to stop there.
You sorted them.
Yeah,
in difficulty.
Yeah, Chinonsky, Sycamensis,
Wow.
Rupnerve,
Okay, I got to cut you off.
Pectinatum,
It's enough.
Morrisonensis. I think I got through them all.
Jesus, you're incorrigible. 7.9 golden cones of honor.
That's right, for
Great.
the Acer pensylvanicum. What do you think,
I
Alex?
think we needed that, Casey. After the last couple weeks,
Yeah.
we've had a couple stinkers.
Yeah, we did.
And
We
I
did.
am right there with you. I think this tree is something special. However, there's a big dark cloud hanging over this review.
Oh my God. You didn't tell me about this.
Which is that I just don't care for maples.
You don't care for maples?
I suppose I like the big leaf,
What?
but I'm not a big maple guy.
But this is a little maple.
Casey.
Oh.
I think they're
What?
fine, but they just don't they don't blow me away. I think they're a little old hat.
This is news for me. I'm shutting my computer and I'm listening intensely.
Thanks.
Tell me more, Alex.
That's pretty much it.
How do you get these feelings? Where'd they come from?
I just I think maples are a little old hat.
Yeah.
You know, a
they're
little
just-
stodgy, a
they're
little
done.
it's the tree of the past. I'm looking at the future,
This
you know?
is a big suit. Blocky suit.
Yes, but not the cool David
Not,
Byrne kind.
No.
This
Not,
is, yeah.
not a Kabuki theater kind of blocky suit.
Exactly, no.
Okay, all right.
This is like, oh, you didn't get that fitted.
Yeah, exactly. Ooh, was that the men's warehouse?
Yeah, I just am not a big fan of maples. But this one, for not being a fan of maples, this one's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah.
The bark is fabulous.
Okay, all right. So it's clawing its way back.
I love this whole alternative sex experience. What did you call it?
That's exactly what I called it.
The alternative sex. Welcome to the alternative sex experience.
By Joe Rogan. No, that is environmental sex determination.
Environmental sex determination. That's
Yes.
very fascinating.
Yeah,
to
yeah,
me.
yeah.
So my grade is not going to be as low as I'm making it seem.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to go 6.8.
6.8. I was expecting it to be lower.
6.89.
That actually makes me feel very good. 8.9. That rounds up to 6.9,
No,
which is nice.
exactly. It's not quite
It's not quite
there.
nice.
Yeah.
That's so funny. That's a good one, Alex.
Thanks.
That's good. It's not quite 69.
Yeah.
It's just shy.
It's one of those thematic scores. There you have it, Casey.
That's that makes me laugh.
Good.
That's good. That's a good one.
It's time for our completely arbitrary AMA. Casey, this week our question is from Corey. Hi, Corey.
Hi, Corey.
Corey kind of gave like a two-parter.
All right. Okay.
So I'm going to give part 2 here.
Okay. All right. That sounds good.
And these questions are about Succession,
Ah.
the HBO series.
Yes. Starring David Allen Greer.
Yes. Corey says, does every habitat and forest type have a more or less, quote, formalized succession process where it's fairly predictable which plants will grow first, which ones will grow later, and which ones will grow last? Or is that only a feature for forests that experience somewhat regular disruptions? For example, if an ecosystem that wasn't used to disruptions like this, were like a forest fire or something,
Yeah.
were suddenly struck by disaster, would the succession process be total chaos as none of the plants knew who should grow back first?
Interesting.
Pretty interesting question,
Yeah, that's
Casey.
a good one.
And then I sort of summarized it. I sort of summarized it as, is there a template for succession?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. That's a very good question. So right off the bat, I think in the largest, grandest sense, yes, there is a template for succession.
Okay.
Where we could say, generally speaking, a certain cast of characters will be growing in a place first after some disturbance. And
so it's impossible, if not extremely, extremely unlikely, that you're going to walk into a brand new forest that was just hit by fire a few years ago.
Yeah.
And they're right in the middle of it be like a late succession tree. Although late succession trees at one point were early succession trees, right?
No, not quite.
All right, yeah, let's yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, anyway, thanks, Casey. What do you think,
All
man?
right, start over. You go.
Oh, that was so good. Alex, no, you're not. I see what you're getting at. There can be early succession trees like Douglas fir that last until the late succession
That is the exact
forest.
one I was thinking of.
Yes, but what we would generally not call that a late succession tree. We would call that an early succession or a mid succession tree that is just still there.
Oh, you would still call it an early succession tree,
I mean,
even in late succession.
If we would a late succession, early succession is more of a forest type. It's more of like a condition of a forest.
I see.
So there are certain characters in that forest that you'd expect to see.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that it's 100% one and none of the other.
Sure.
So you could see...
Yeah, there's lots of, I'm assuming, overlap. It's not completely linear. And
no, definitely not. In fact, it's explicitly cyclical.
Good point. It's mid-succession at midnight tonight.
Yeah, we'll see you there. Cool. Bring your cigarettes. I feel like everything cool has
the baseball
cigarettes
diamond.
with it. Yeah, in the baseball diamond. Don't tell your parents.
And remember your cigarettes.
And remember your cigarettes. Give some for me too. I'm only 17. I believe that what I would say is that there's a certain group of characters that you would see in a late succession forest, a certain complexity in the forest itself in terms of its structure, what's growing, how long it's been growing, or how long it's been dead and how dead it is, that you can say this is a late succession forest. And then you can look for the species in the latest succession, what we would call old growth kind of forest, or maybe what we would call a climax forest.
Wow.
Which is, again, the issue with climax is that it also like has a linearness to it. So I don't like really using that words, but it also helps like it gives us a good idea of what we're talking about, but it also just frames it in a less than great way.
Yeah.
Because you have early, mid, and late. And then when you start that over, it starts again at early and then mid and then late.
Right.
But that still doesn't make it into a nice cycle. It just says, here's a linear progression that stops and then starts over.
Right.
So I'm dealing with this with a potential project, and I've been thinking a lot about it. And it comes down to the idea that when you have this cast of characters in this forest with a certain structure, you can say this is an old growth late succession forest. Whatever the term is, when you go into a forest, you look at it and you can mark down these things. You can say these are the species that exist in this forest. Now, if you go to an early succession forest, there's going to be a different cast of characters.
Sure.
They have different attributes. They grow faster. Often, depending on where you are, in the eastern United States, for example, in the southeast, pines are the early succession, and then the late succession are oaks and beeches and hardwoods. Out here, it's the exact opposite.
That's right.
We have broadleaf trees are early succession, and
Wow.
late succession are usually big conifers.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
I never thought about that.
Isn't it fun? I thought I
Yeah.
learned this in college, and I was like, wow, I'd never actually put that together. But
Interesting.
when you think about it, it's very clear.
Every tree has their day.
Every tree does, and
Even
this.
if your early succession over here, go move out east.
Yeah, you're gonna find something. I literally use that expression like around the succession kind of cycle. Every different plant will have its turn in the sun. Is how I kind of phrased it.
Oh, that's nice.
So when you're thinking about this in a grand scale, you can apply this theory in a broad sense on almost every forest type, but not necessarily every ecosystem, because every ecosystem has a different way that disturbance kind of flows through it.
Interesting.
So in a big forest, classic disturbance is wind or fire. Those are the two big ones that you can usually find across almost any space. So those big forest systems, as soon as that disturbance comes through, it's usually a large disturbance. It doesn't have to be, but tends to be sometimes, certainly nowadays in the West with bigger forest fires. Then you can say, okay, I can predict which trees are going to be there because I know what this space looks like.
Okay.
However, in forests that generally don't have disturbance, or what we would call a very long cycle of disturbance, so the trees live in an undisturbed forest for the most part for like 500 years, then you get that big drought with that perfect lightning strike, lands on it, burns everything down, that starts over again. The tropical forests are a good example. The coast range out here in the West is another good example where they just generally don't have very short fire intervals. They're very long. That is an instance where the plants figure it out really quickly because some plants are adapted to that later succession forest. They want a little bit more shade when they start to grow, and they grow a little bit slower, whereas other trees require full sun and they grow really fast. So they've just made these different kind of deals and adaptations to grow in a certain way.
Sure.
So that is generally an adaptation you can see everywhere in the forest. So you can make those predictions if you understand what they look like. But if you go to, say, the Saguaro National Forest, which is, forest, it's all these big giant cactus and a few other species.
I'm going to go ahead and call that a forest.
I think so. And it's official. There is the Saguaro National Forest, and that's what they're filled with down in Arizona. But they are, the disturbance, there's no fire really that comes through because everything's so spaced apart.
Sure.
So the most recent disturbance was the big heat dome we had a couple years ago, or I think last year actually. Got really hot down there for like a month or two straight. And the cactus got so empty of water that they just started falling over.
Oh my God.
It was crazy.
Like husks.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, wow, that's so dry. It just could not, it lost turgor pressure essentially and keeled over. So these kind of situations, there's not going to be a mad rush of new species because demonstrably the forest hasn't changed. So this also would happen, say...
Yeah, because a tree will fall over in the forest.
Yeah, exactly.
And nothing really...
You get maybe that one little spot of light that new plants can grow up. But in a forest where there's ample light everywhere all the time, there's not really any succession there.
Yeah, it's not a macro issue either.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you got to ask yourself, did anybody hear it?
And then the answer is going to be, huh? And this would happen also in places like savannas where there's really long distances between big trees so that there's not really even a succession at all.
Sure.
Which then calls into question, well, is that a forest or is that a different kind of, a different type of land cover? So it really is one of these things that as a large general theory, we can use it to predict that there will be a certain cast of characters at different stages of forest complexity and age between disturbances. But it's not necessarily something that is built and designed and perfect every time where you can say, this is exactly the tree that's going to happen because it always overlaps. It's a very squishy, very long transition. It's like...
Yeah.
When did you transition from a kid to an adult?
Interesting. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just kind of one of those things that helps us. It's a tool to help visualize and understand, but it can't it is not, it's applicable, but when you start looking close, the details get muddled and you can't quite tell it apart.
I think there is this slippery slope of like rules in nature, we love rules.
We do. We love patterns.
Yes. And so we look for early succession, mid succession. That's so nice and clean.
Exactly. It's beautiful.
And then you see it and it's like, I don't know where this is.
Yeah,
I see some smallish medium trees. There's a patch of burnt shit over there.
Over there there's like 16 giant trees that haven't been touched.
Right. Like what does that make this? You know? And the same is true. I always think about like screenwriting. You learn kind of like the form that a script should take, the hero's journey.
Totally. Yeah.
And then you get really in the weeds of like, okay, page 26, this thing has to happen. It's like, well, that's not really how movies always work,
Yeah.
It's just you got to work on vibes.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a perfect example because you can create a structure, an outline of generally what happens and use that to predict anything, anywhere in any forest, you could probably pretty well predict. For our succession, I just Googled, I was like, I don't want to do a tree that I know of that we've covered already. I want to find a nice tropical tree. So I just Googled it, and there's all these different things where they talk about forest succession and what species grow where in all these other different forest types, but they just have all these different pressures and responses where it's just a little bit different.
Totally.
Even the Brazil nut, that's a late succession tree. It grows super slow and it lives long. So we can say that tree has the attributes that would make it a late succession tree. Is it necessarily a late succession tree? Well, it depends on what the rest of the forest is around
Sure,
it.
yeah.
That's how you can tell.
That's my big takeaway is that there are no late succession trees, only late succession forests.
Correct. I've had that conversation about old growth a long time. Everyone says, this is an old growth tree. I'm like, no, that's an old tree.
It's a tree growing in an old growth forest.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting.
It's a larger idea. So yeah, that's a complex, good, fun question.
Yeah, thank you, Corey, for sending that our way.
Yeah, definitely.
If you want to ask a question on the pod, become a Treemium member by joining up on arbitrarypod.supercast.com. We also have a merch store, arbitrarypod.com/merch. Hats are imminent.
Yeah, they are. SJ's crushing it right now.
The rising tide of capitalism.
Is that still rising? I'm sure it is. I feel like we've been flooded in it for some time.
Well said. Yeah, we would love your support if you want to support this podcast and keep the lights on. And we hope you appreciate
Us.
us.
Good work, Alex.
We appreciate you.
He's fading quick. Oh, geez, Alex is asleep. I'm going to take over from here, everyone.
arbitrarypod.supercast.com to support the podcast or the merch store, or just listen to those ads. That's another great way to support the pod.
Yeah. Also, tell your friends. Like us on Facebook.
That is the biggest word of mouth, we call it in the biz.
It is great. Also, shout out to like the 3 or so people that have randomly been like, hey, are you Casey Clapp? I've been doing a lot of tree walks recently.
Yeah.
And some people literally just run by. It happened yesterday. And this person was like, hey, are you Casey Clapp? You're
funny.
Random guy walking around looking at trees. I had a suspicion. And I was like, hey, yeah, that's pretty good. You got that spot on.
Shout out to that guy.
Yeah. There's lots of people, actually.
Oh.
It was several different people.
Well, that doesn't happen to me so much.
Well, you don't go out and look at trees as much as I do, Alex, I think. But
I think it's happened to me exactly twice.
Really?
Which is
that's great.
Not zero.
Yeah. I mean, that's way better because, like I said, generally, I'm out there doing things and looking at trees. So I'm in the area doing the thing. You often are not outside listening to me talk about trees.
You're a teacher at school, which you absolutely recognize. I'm a teacher that you run into at Target, and you're like, oh, are you?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Are you a teacher? Oh, I did. I heard your class the other day. That was great.
All right, everybody. We'll be back next week with more trees. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Completely Arbitrary, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye. Completely Arbitrary is produced by Alex Crowson and Casey Clapp. Our artwork is by Jillian Barthold, and our music is by Aves and the Mini Vandals. If you want to support this podcast and become a Treemium member, head over to arbitrarypod.supercast.com. Thanks for listening.